Hello everyone, this is Albert McElhenney and I want to welcome you to this introductory video of the Jesus Mythicism Course. This course will be divided into a number of course subjects, each of which corresponds to a book in an ebook series I've been writing titled A Christian Response to Jesus Mythicism. On the screen now you'll see the 7 books that have been published thus far in that series. There will be more books forthcoming. They will also be included in this course. The course subjects may be viewed independently of each other, although those without much background in Jesus Mythicism may want to view some of the course subjects that are considered foundational material first, particularly the one that corresponds to the book A Quick Survey of Jesus Mythicism. That will at least give you some introduction to what the ideas that are out there and what we'll be covering in other course subjects. The books are available on Amazon.com. I will give links. They're in Kindle format. Those who do not have a Kindle device can download an app so you can read them on PC, Mac, Android, iPhones, etc. Now let us turn to the subject of Jesus Mythicism. This is the idea, an idea that's become popular among a number of those who in what they call new atheists, that Jesus never existed. There was no historical individual corresponding to the gospel accounts, that no one lived in the first century walking the roads of Galilee and Judea who we would recognize as Jesus. He's a completely mythical construct. This idea does not have much scholarly support. In fact, that has almost no scholarly support. It's not taken seriously in the scholarly community, but it does have a growing and vocal presence on the internet. It's difficult to understand how such a fringe viewpoint suddenly gained a foothold, but then again, the internet is a place that has become a boon for all sorts of strange ideas and all sorts of conspiracy theories, this one among them. It is, after all, far more likely that someone would come across such a website than would ever read a scholarly tome on Christianity's origins. Thus, for Christians who want to use the web as a tool for evangelism or to give their witness, they will suddenly find themselves confronted by charges that no scholar takes seriously, but they're out there on the internet. Unfortunately, since few scholars would even bother answering them, you're not going to get responses to things like the film Zeitgeist, the book The Christ Conspiracy by Acharya S., or the Jesus Mysteries by Timothy Frake and Peter Gandy, or The Pagan Christ by Tom Harper. And you're certainly not going to get much in the way of a response to the nonsense promoted by someone like Jordan Maxwell. But as I said, the material is out there. And just to give you an idea of the disdain with which this is held by most scholars, consider the response of the Christian scholar N.T. Wright, who stated that having him address such material would be like asking a professional astronomer to debate with the authors of a book claiming the moon was made of green cheese. Unfortunately, although I certainly can understand the desire not to justify such material even with an answer, the problem is, the unfortunate truth is that given an accessible presentation, even the most absurd ideas about Christianity can spread across the internet and into Main Street America. To be honest, the most widely circulated ideas attacking Christianity these days are not from liberal scholars, but from internet conspiracy theorists. And while these ideas are nonsensical, they do contribute to an accumulated clutter that needs to be cleared in order to make a presentation of Christianity in the public sphere. Yet, even at this late date, you find most scholars laughing at such material. They don't take it seriously. And this, as I said, does leave a void. Now, I do want to credit those who have answered it. In particular, J.P. Holding edited a book titled Shattering the Christ Myth. Stanley Porter and Stephen J. Bedard wrote a book, Unmasking the Pagan Christ, which answered the Tom Harper book. But the mythicist position has been evolving over the years, and there's all sorts of new versions of it, and these have not been addressed. And so I began writing this book series as a way of answering these charges more or less on the fly. Now, my own experience with this goes back a decade and a half ago, when I had an acquaintance who was a fan of the conspiracy theorist Jordan Maxwell. Now, he had presented me with a lot of material that he wanted me to look at once he found out I was a Christian, that supposedly revealed the true origins of Christianity. I kind of wanted to just brush the whole thing off, but he was very persistent, and so I looked at the material, and frankly, I was shocked at first. I wasn't exactly sure what to make of it, because I had never heard anything like this before, and I can understand others not having heard of this before. Well, the more I looked into it, though, once I started investigating, I found out it was all based upon the work of 19th century pseudo-scholars like Alvin Boyd Kuhn and Kersey Graves and Gerald Massey and Madame Blavatsky and Richard Carlisle and Robert Taylor and Godfrey Higgins. And there's a whole list of the usual suspects that you find in this sort of material. And their work that in turn was based upon earlier esoteric mysticism. When it came down to it, it was all occult nonsense from a bygone era, so it really, there was nothing to it, and I never expected to have to deal with this material again. And after returning the material, I soon lost contact with that budding conspiracy theorist. Now, fast forward a few years. I start hearing about this film Zeitgeist. People were asking me about it. They described the film to me, and although I hadn't seen the film, this sounded familiar, and I said, I've dealt with something like this before, and it's nonsense. Just don't worry about it. But the film, I kept hearing about it and hearing about it and hearing about it, and my curiosity was piqued, and I just wanted to double check, so I went online, found a transcript for Zeitgeist. Sure enough, it sure sounded like the same material, so I checked the sources they gave. And sure enough, the names Gerald Massey and the usual suspects all came up, and I realized this film was just the same old stuff. I kind of ignored it for a while, but I kept hearing about this film. Finally, I decided to take a look at it. So I watched the film, and I was shocked. Not only was it the same ridiculous material, but it took the absurdity to an entirely new level. Nothing in the film made any sense if you had any understanding of church history. It just was totally ridiculous. However, there was one thing I was sure of. Whoever made this film was a fan of Jordan Maxwell. And I've pointed this out before, and people have challenged me on this, but it turns out I was correct. Because a few years later, I came across an interview that had been made in 2007 when Zeitgeist first went viral, in which Peter Joseph Merola was interviewed by Jeff Rense. Peter Joseph Merola, who goes by the name Peter Joseph, is the creator of Zeitgeist. That's Jeff Rense, the interviewer on the left, Peter Joseph on the right. And in this interview, he stated quite clearly that he was a big follower of Maxwell, had studied Maxwell's work for years. He considered Maxwell the lifeblood of Zeitgeist, that it was a walk through Maxwell's work in many ways, etc., and just praised Maxwell to high heaven. And anyone who understands just how bizarre Maxwell's material is will understand that this completely undercuts Zeitgeist. Because I want you to understand something. If you watch a Jordan Maxwell video and you have any sense at all, you'll know this guy's just, stuff is ridiculous. It's so easy to spot. And I'll grant you, there are some people who can't spot it, but it is just utterly ridiculous. But Peter Joseph made it more presentable. He cleaned it up. He made it. He had the nice music in the background and the nice graphics, rather than Maxwell making ridiculous statements, which is what you see in his videos. And so it became more palatable, perhaps, to a mass audience. But it's still the same absurdity. Now, for those who doubt this, I'm going to let you hear a section of this interview so you can see for yourself Peter Joseph, in his own words, stating quite clearly that his film was based upon the work of Jordan Maxwell.
Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on, man.
How many documentaries have you produced before this one?
This is the first one, actually.
That's what I know. Now,
Okay.
when I started watching it, I have to admit that I immediately recognized Jordan Maxwell when I heard his voice, and he's been a friend for probably, I'll bet 14 years now, and one of the first people I had on the program when I started it, we're in our 14th year, and it was so good to hear Jordan. I know him very well. We've had so many hours on the program together. Not for many years, though. He's been a guest. It's been a long time. But when I heard him on there, he never sounded better, and it's just great. How did you get connected with Jordan Maxwell?
Well, actually, I've been studying Jordan for a long time. He's probably the lifeblood of the entire piece. What should be understood, though, is that the segments that are taken of Jordan are from his own productions. So basically, I've been trying to get in touch with him, frankly, for quite some time, and he's a very difficult man to get in touch with. He should be aware of this film by now, but he's actually, as far as I know, I don't know if he's even seen this project, even though I have physically sent it to. I sent it to him, but he never responded. He's apparently, he's a kind of an elusive guy.
That's Jordan. No, you got it.
Yeah,
Oh, but believe me, he's aware of it. He's seen it, Peter. Believe me, he's a man. He doesn't miss much.
Right. But I've owed him a debt of gratitude because he is, as I said, the lifeblood of the piece. The piece basically kind of walks through his work in many different ways, from the first section to not as much the middle section, but he is very much outspoken about part two, and the third section in regards to the corporation of the United States and just the way things have been operating and the takeovers. And was really proud how it actually worked out that I got to have him as sort of the central focal point, speech-wise, in each section.
True.
So I'm hoping to actually finally get in touch with him. I really love to talk to him.
So there you have it. As you heard with your own ears, Peter Joseph, in fact, did base Zeitgeist upon the work of Jordan Maxwell. Some people were, of course, under the impression that Zeitgeist was based on the work of D.M. Murdoch, also known as Acharya S. And while it turns out that Murdoch was consulted prior to the release of the final cut version of Zeitgeist, the original version of Zeitgeist was released before she was ever contacted. When the final cut version was to be prepared, Joseph had come under a lot of criticism because the film was just so utterly ridiculous. There were many responses to it where people were just saying this is absurd. And he consulted with Murdoch, and she gave him advice for the final cut version. Now, the final cut version is less obviously bad, but it's still pretty bad. And while she was consulted, still, it is Jordan Maxwell who is the inspiration for the film. Now, one of the results of Murdoch being contacted was that the transcript, or the online transcript of Zeitgeist, was eventually taken down and later replaced with a source book written by Joseph and Murdoch, with Murdoch dealing specifically with part one. She did not have anything to do with parts 2 and 3 of the film. But her material, while perhaps not quite as obvious as the really bad material originally used by Joseph, still nonetheless completely fails in trying to make a case for this, and still no scholar takes any of this nonsense seriously. You can't. Now, so why bother? Why do we still bother? And I want to explain the importance of answering this material. And what you have to think of is, imagine you are your average Christian in the pews. You really don't know anything about this material. You've never heard any of these ideas before. And one day, you are challenged with claims that everything you know about Jesus, the virgin birth, the crucifixion, resurrection, everything, all of it, none of it ever happened. None of this ever happened. In fact, there wasn't even a Jesus. There was no Jesus. Jesus was nothing but an astrological metaphor for the sun. His disciples were the 12 signs of the zodiac, and events recorded in the Gospels merely corresponded to the solar cycle. Nefarious characters, potentates and priests of every kind, invented Jesus to control the masses. They used him as a means of maintaining power. Just as the priest of an earlier era of Horus and Mithras had done the same with those deities. Jesus was nothing more than an updated version of Egypt's Horus, right down to the nativity story written on the walls of Luxor Temple. Perhaps you heard this from a co-worker at the water cooler, or maybe one of your children heard it from a friend, and suddenly their faith was shaken. The film Zeitgeist was cited as the source for this material. You've never heard of this before, and you were told it was available online, so you went and watched it. And by the end of part 1, your world was turned upside down. You really had never heard any of this before. You don't know how to answer it. You want to dismiss it, but you want to know the truth as well. And the doubts linger and perhaps take on a life of their own. You just don't know how to respond. And the fact is, this is only the beginning. Zeitgeist is only the beginning. There are all sorts of theories out there. Some people say, as in Zeitgeist, that Jesus is nothing more than the sun. Others, that he's the equivalent of a deity of a Roman mystery cult. You will also hear ideas that Jesus was some ethereal creation of a sublunar realm floating around, but wasn't really an historical person. There are others who think Jesus was a mushroom. Yes, there are such people. Maybe Jesus was a space alien. Maybe he's a rewriting of Julius Caesar. There's all sorts of ideas. Maybe he's all of the above, because there are, in fact, people who will accept any of the aforementioned Jesuses. They'll accept any Jesus, except this one. They will not accept the Jesus who died for the sins of the world. That's the only Jesus they cannot accept. So where does this leave us? Well, in this course, I will plan to answer all of these charges and show why they are utterly ridiculous, and why those promoting them really are either ill-informed or dishonest in their presentation of material. Now, I don't necessarily expect mythicists to change their mind by watching this course, although I certainly would welcome that possibility. They're not my target audience for this course. Rather, I hope to equip Christians, particularly those who need to address these claims but haven't studied the issue in great detail. And finally, I hope that this course will both reassure Christians and remove obstacles for any who might feel themselves drawn to the gospel message. But in all things, may the glory be to God alone, and I hope you will join me for future videos in this course. Thank you, and God bless.